first, right?
This is really incredible, and I wanted to just share a couple of anecdotes. The first one occurred over 30 years ago. I was a rabbinical student here, and I was in the sermon of my colleague, Lori Foreman-Jacoby, and she had asked Amy Eisen to say a few words on that occasion. Amy looked at Lori, and she offered, "Sister, may you become a myriad of thousands." Words, those beautiful. And then, I blinked, and 25 years, and you can read the wonderful stories that we've collected. For the women that we're honoring today, my stories, I share many of our male colleagues, who I count among my dearest friends. I've had the honor of serving in the rabbinical, and it has been incredibly gratifying because of the friendships that I've made. We share bonds with rabbis of many different denominations, but we profound that it's above gender and geography, and I am so grateful to be counted amongst one of you, and so grateful that you are all here today. This is a sea change, that you are not quietly, not sensitive as to who may not conservative rabbi serving on the North Shore of Chicago. Dear friend and colleague Annie Tucker, to be my next nearest neighbor. And while I consider her a friend and a colleague, I also consider her as really the next generation. And rabbis, which is really 25 years is long in my life, but a blip in the history of people. And I got this crazy idea was going to act in her installation, which I did say to her at that time, "I've been waiting for you for 25 years. And what I wanted to our panel, and I'm now up Bill Gershon, who's going to do the.
On behalf of the entire Assembly, I want to express our appreciation to our committee co-chairs, Deborah Newman-Kamen and Ellen Willens-Fields. Let's express our appreciation to them. To their committee, Rabbi Joe Alter, you have done. Ashira Konigsberg, Bill Lebo, and our outstanding professors, Nadia Hoida, Max Arad, Emily Handel. Toda Rabbah for everything. Specifically to Chancellor, to Mark Gary for your friendship and your leadership and your partnership of the conservative movement. Indeed, one could argue that it was the watershed event of the conservative movement. And it's wonderful and such a nice feeling to come together finally to celebrate one of the greatest achievements of our movement. This achievement women have made to the rabbinate, conservative Judaism, and the Jewish people. Those visionaries who sought this change did so out of personal and religious convictions based on their halakha and the moral and ethical imperative they believed was at the core of the Jewish tradition. And the of the ordination of women can take place without leadership and courage and vision of Rabbi Clone, a blessed Chancellor of the seminary. Rabbi Cohn led this transformation, and for those of us, as I was during those days, the issue of the ordination of rabbis, not only here as JT, how a creative, responsive, and most importantly, halakha could inform and Judaism for a new age. It changed Jewish history. The second story took place in Israel. I was with Dr. Cohn. It was Shabbos morning, and we were walking back from shul. And on the way, and goes the man who made women rabbis. Dr. Cohn, with a smile on his face and dirt in his eyes, really, if there's anything I've ever done that I believe, it's the ordaining of women. Right thing, and no matter what others will say, have changed Jewish history and Judaism for the better. The better. As the ordination of women by, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator and panelists. Chancellor Arnold Eisen, no introduction, is one of the most authorities on American Judaism and has had an illustrious career. Arnie will moderate our session this afternoon. Federation of New York. He is a past president of the Abraham Joshua Heschel School and holds degrees from Harvard College, the University, and JTS. And our next panelist, author and lecturer Blu Greenberg, has published widely on issues of feminism and the Jewish, as well as other subjects of scholarly interest. Of the Jewish Orthodox Jewish Week, is the author of more than a dozen books, You and Me, created with Marlo Thomas and the Ms. Foundation. Francine was on a mission for the study of women in the rabbinate and at the forefront of the struggle to have women ordained as rabbis in the conservative. Let us welcome our panelists and Chancellor Eisen. Chancellor Eisen, I turn it over.
Where Gershon Cohen did that historic act. It's an honor for us to have you all here. It truly was an event in the history of the Jewish people and of Judaism. I am going to play a minute. We had a conversation before this one. I'm going to jump in that did a lot to make it happen. The members of Ezrat Nashim who stand and be recognized. And now I'm going to begin with Francine Klagsbrun. Francine, what was it like? What was brewing? What was simmering? What this happened, and make us also.
Because I remember it all back in those olden days, as they say. The Ezrat Nashim women raised this issue in 1972 at a Rabbinical Assembly convention. Those of us on the outside were not really, I at least, was not that involved at that point, but decided to have this commission to study the role of women in the rabbinate. Gershon Cohen, who was one of my very closest friends, invited me to be on that commission. And at that time, I was also working on my book, Voices of Wisdom. Voices of Wisdom is a biblical, midrashic, etc. And it started occurring there were very few women's voices in this book. When I sat on this commission, of course, he could believe it, but we on the commission went around the country and spoke letters from people. And so I have in my desk a pile of letters of people for the Jewish community, a large percentage, but a number, a good enough percent, no. And here were some of their reasons. Women are smarter than men. They do so much better in school than men do. And if we have women rabbis, the men are going to all fall by the wayside. There won't be any more male rabbis. Because when women get into a field, somehow is diminished, and then lots of male rabbis. So I think it was the right decision for us to have made at the time. It was a struggle. There were meetings. There were people screaming and yelling at each other. But the majority voted for it, and we knew it was the right thing to do.
Brief follow-up, but was it a conclusion?
I'd like to answer that. We had to swear. And Cohen was really his wife always says it was my fault. I hope so. To swear, promise that I was not going to keep that promise.
Well, Alisa, anything to add on this point?
go on if you want.
No, I will add that all that Francine described was observed and taken to heart by I would say a small percentage of women in the Orthodox community. The Orthodox community remained pretty adamant against the idea, not even you suggested, Francine. Certainly it was Judaism. It was coming much closer to home, and so the steps taken within the conservative movement were taken seriously, if not nervously. How it impacted on me, all that was going on, was very powerful. I began a journey formation of women rabbis with a very negative response to the ordination of Sally Prizand, and I watched. It took me, I would say, almost the better part of the 70s to observe. While I was observing her and changing my mind, me what was going on in the conservative movement, and particularly fidelity to halakha, and that halakha was the basis of a decision, not a sociological decision. Even the arguments, the proponent took a similar journey. It just started and finished 2 decades later. So all that we have the Orthodox community of women in the rabbinate, and we made tremendous strides in the last 2 decades. I have to go to conservative.
Giving us the segue to the question I'm going to pose to you. We're here to talk about impact that this step inside conservative Judaism has over the years on the Jewish community, and how the interaction, how did that impact take people distance and saying, well, maybe we should think of opposition, which then gives way to opposition to the opposition. Tell us a little bit about how the impact happened.
That's a good PhD thesis. And I think within all of the communities and the interrelationship between communities, I know for myself that go back and look at on Women in Shalom to participate in the Judaism discussion. Already able to say women rabbis, smicha, but I could not say pulpit. I should say, I expressly said not pulpit. But then there were these models around me. The model, of course, was the original model, I think, was Ezrat Nashim, the agenda of Ezrat Nashim, and then all that had taken place within the conservative movement and the input of the United Synagogue and the lay. This was for somebody who had already experienced and understood some arguments against, and seeing these, such as the honor of the community, and this before, we're going to divinely established distinctive roles, gender roles, etc. Some of those arguments I had already encountered many of those in the Orthodox community in relation to women, in relation to women. I think I could personally be more open to the positive arguments, positive reading it with eyes in a very positive, and feeling that personally I could take this step forward. This was a community, but I began to see signs in the Orthodox community. There were little example. Do I have an example or two or three? Okay. I remember speaking to a group of the Scholars Circle in 1990, and by that time I'd come full understanding women rabbis propounding for the Orthodox community in Talmud, and basically their response was, don't learning Torah Lishma. In 2000, I was invited to speak to David Silber, head of Drisha, the interaction, just seeing women rabbis, the growing number of women rabbis, seeing their names on the front page of the Jewish Week, and having that title was a lot. In the Orthodox community, in 1993, in the Orthodox movement were influenced by what was going on in the conservative movement and taken this idea of the Orthodox community. And that was a really big step for us on women's learning, packed Street, I believe.
Yeah, I want to second what Blu said, on both sides. I felt very strongly that our rabbis influenced, and Blu used to say in 10 years we'll have women. I do want to say about halachic before. When I was on this then, there have been people testified to us, people, Dmitrovsky, I sit and listen to Orthodox authorities using exactly this, starting all over again, ignoring the fact that I had discussed this, that this has been done and shown and so on. It's as if the conservative movement, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. They start all over again, but it makes me feel good because it's the exact same text that we use, the same arguments. It shows.
Continue the question of impact. We will take it in, we'll broaden out in the Jewish community in general, beyond the rabbinate, and also the way this was transmitted to the coming generation of women. Not the generation of the founders, but the women who were watching them, perhaps thinking of, aha, I never thought that I could do this. To do this possible, but maybe it is. So let's talk about the larger impact of this decision to ordain women rabbis for the position of women in the Jewish community.
So just before I answer, and maybe this is part of the answer, I just want to say to Deborah that that you gave actually has come true. I want to just you to everyone in this room who has been involved in the development of the institution of the beyond in Jewish life, and think that the fact that women were allowed, were enabled to take on the natural sacred role in Jewish life, change in Jewish life. I think it unleashed creative that had been held back for a very long time. And my God, we're talking about half of the population. So why shouldn't there be a tremendous of creativity that had been? And of course, you know, we saw it in synagogues. And this is really a little bit is all through my own lens. I'm not really speaking here as of New York, but I don't have a PhD in this. So it really is it's through my lens. Women, the change that happened in terms of the participation of women in Jewish ritual life had a tremendously effect on as participants. I certainly felt it enormously inspiring to participate in a very different way. I came from I grew up dividing up the Haftorah. So I think the initial synagogue, but I see concentric circles opening up from there. The leadership of synagogues, presidents of synagogues, founders of synagogues. Francine was the founder of a synagogue I'm a member of, and the founding president of the synagogue was a woman. So what I saw in that instance and stepping in the opportunity that had not existed before, that were unmet, of all kinds. Here at JTS, we now have the first woman chair of the board. All of the institutions around the sense of what's needed, that had not been, this is my view. I worked with Robin Bernstein of the Educational Alliance for a period of time. She was interested, director of the Educational Alliance, a legacy organization, community center on the Lower East Side. She was interested in figuring out how Jewish belong in her agency. Participated in significant ways in the establishment or the growth of the Abraham Heschel School. The leadership, the building of that unique approach, I believe, to Jewish life, the egalitarian perspective of that institution, inclusion of that institution when I was involved in it was primarily led by women. The head of school was a woman. The presidents of the board, who I admire tremendously, who brought tremendous skills and heart to the project, Virginia Baird, Terry Krulwich, Shira Nadich-Levin, the daughter of a rabbi, exceptional and tremendous models for me.
Judah Nadich was a big advocate, very much big advocate of women rabbis.
That doesn't. And I will get to Federation. My involvement in Federation, interest in to promote Jewish identity. People I encountered in the field of identity building at who I believe were influenced by the fact that Reuben Constantin absolutely women's leadership in the rabbinic world. Of the commission, the managing director of the Life That Had Not Before. And then beyond that, organizations that were founded to support. I want to note Shifra Bronznick, sitting here also, and her Advancing Women Professionals, which has been of tremendous help out their identity. Who are they as young men and young women? What does Judaism have to say about the development of that identity? It's part of either in rabbinical school, and or influenced by it. I will say that in this generation, things that is that the impact in terms of women cabinet, I think is both about very and feel held by ritual. There are so many people, ability of so many. That's a tremendous, tremendous benefit of the creativity and the experimentation women have done both in the.
That's a lot of food for thought here because in terms of ordination, leadership, those other leadership, there's something different about, changing the religious precepts, whereas the leadership of those organizations, but the more organizations. But the more I thought is that a certain irony that rabbis and that the or person, those problems in the last 30 years have exacerbated, if that's the word I can use. So things are going on side by side, which means that with the in that the core problems of have not been are not on do not seem like a resolution right now.
So can I just add one or respond? So I will say that is absolutely true, and I've thought about that too. And I think that we have to deal with. I see some hopeful signs in the development of by, for example, Rachel Cowan, the Institute for Jewish Studies. I think about what in synagogues or what is not happening in synagogue to help think about those issues.
Maybe the inclusion or infusion of women into the rabbinate is going to sort of heighten the no, this is, I don't really want to say this, I think. It is going to heighten the dilemmas and the decline, and that women's energies are going to push the whole focus models, which is pumfakert. How do you say pumfakert in English? Or what? Upside, right.
No, Blue said Habu is not negative, which is not. You're saying there women are looking for other experimentation or other ways of expressing themselves. But I want to just stress for a minute, many women in now are reading Torah, are leading. I mean, this was Europe. And years ago, 30 years ago, we used to talk about, yeah, women should have aliyot. You know, there are still a lot of synagogues where women don't have aliyot. When I think about my synagogue, and I don't know that it's so different than all the others, I think that will, and their daughters. I see that with my granddaughter, who doesn't go to shul that often, but she loves Torah and leading services. I think that there's a lot of hope for that, and that certainly would never have come about if not had women rabbis to begin with.
Question follows up directly. Let's talk about now, not foretelling the future. Let's not. But if you had to know things that we really have to do, and maybe.
Yeah, exactly. No, because this is a conservative movement, and I think things for the future past. But I think that we need to emphasize what Judaism yet again, because I don't think that has been emphasized enough. I don't think that the younger generation knows. It's not answering the women question, but it's answering the women in a sense. I think if there's rabbis need to be doing in the conservative movement, both women and men, is teaching, and the Orthodox, not exactly to the left, but it's extending itself in that way. And people are saying, well, but there's conservative Judaism. I think that's something this group particular stuff that
Jumping off something you said before, which is one of the things that I've observed is that there are women reading Torah, many fewer men reading Torah. So if I look at my synagogue, for example, people who are getting up there to read Torah on a weekly basis are mostly women. And I think this is not something that I've only noticed. I think that certainly more strides that women make in leadership life, but I think that that we need to have models of men and women really working together. Make sure that there are models for men that are desirable and that they look up to just as much as there are for young guys, and be involved as a pathway for them.
I guess that letter that somebody wrote, that women are smarter than men, and the men aren't going to say with it, probably was true.
So this is quite a complex issue and an interesting question. So certainly performance, and it certainly added talented leaders. When I was reading the bios, not the bios, in the program, beautiful, a really extraordinary program. It was nothing short of inspiration. It'll continue to be in my, to the masses. It's the masses right now that are the problem. That means the big question, connect those two dots. Women rabbis have had strong influence and problem so much because of the power of the chiyuv, but we have community, half Shabbat, a whole issue now you know, can you play your, some of the principles of day schools are saying of, you know, that it's a chiyuv that doesn't have that. The synagogues are pretty, but I think the combination, but in the large Pew report, the larger part of the Jewish community interested in synagogue life and isn't interested in being spiritually. That's the real partnership minyanim in Orthodoxy, that oftentimes there are more women present than men. Now, part of that is single women who to go, you know, and when feminization of any or any of, you know, for example, of 300 women, is it 300 now ordained within conservative Judaism? Is it 300? It's an amazing 300. And, you know, they choose what professions. Have we done statistical analyses of what mostly, and, you know, what is it women do? Are they choosing chaplaincy? Are they choosing hands-on? Are they choosing religious education? How to work out time issues and child care issues. These are things who are coming now to the Orthodox rabbinate are starting to ask. So I guess what will keep them coming.
I welcome you to come down to the microphone and ask questions. And while we're assembling, I thought I would say one as the man up here on the stage. On behalf of the speaking only from I don't think we should underestimate the importance of the change, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. Three things that are very, one is that we would have been deprived had we not had women speaking, women writing Torah commentary, and I can't imagine us without it. I mean, particular authors and particular books and particular ideas, but again, it would have seemed stunting. I'm a person who seeks wholeness. One of the most meaningful lines that I know of in life is B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. The of God has been transformed. I think we're thinking of God in the same way as we would have if only men were speaking in the synagogue, only the baby boomer generation who thinks we're the center of everything. I think in this something really crucial, not just to the history of the American Jewish community, but to the history of Judaism. Something crucial to the history of Judaism has happened, and that's what we're celebrating here.
Can I say that anecdote? This is really just an anecdote, but it's one man and Orthodox, and my Haskell Lookstein, who was an Orthodox rabbi, was there, and he's a good friend. And he introduced, and I said, "This is my granddaughter. She's now studying with a tutor to learn all for Yom Kippur, for Rosh Hashanah, for everything." I don't know if she thinks maybe she'll go out and make money that way. And without missing a beat, herself, and we were thrilled.
Yes, please. Tell us who you are.
I am Carolyn Braun, class of '88. Which is when I got interviewed. When I went to the seminary, I was not going to work in a synagogue. There's a couple of people I do want to thank the seminary for having us in and for bringing in gay and lesbian rabbis also, but I think what happened was that the seminary felt that they finished their job as soon as they signed that piece of paper, and that we came in and we became doing amazing things. The irony is that, and in that, and in the synagogue, mainly we are just great for the synagogues. They can pay us less. We will work harder. We will, be as spiritual as they want. And as soon as we're going to give our movement some advice, I would say looking at us for men, and I do, but from my standpoint, they're not bringing in, And so they bring in a woman, and we end up being the same as everybody else. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Hi, Peretz. I'm the Associate Dean of the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles. Thank you. And I also loved what you said. It really revolves around how to help rabbis and congregations, in particular those of a certain age. And so my question really is, what advice would you give to women and others who are encountering the professional opportunities for women and other groups should match the opportunity of women being in the communities?
Well, I mean, I can't answer. I don't know the specifics of that, but I will say this. I think women have to make an effort to, they've made a great effort until now, but to be courageous, stick your necks out. For example, when our synagogue was looking for a new rabbi because our rabbi retired, not one woman applying, and I was just stunned. This is why were there no women after him? That's not, and I think maybe the training has to be said that you have to take a chance, and even if you get, you have to take a chance.
But I imagine, I mean, I don't know what they're doing. Rabbinic organizations that serve rabbis should be thinking about how to serve them better, men and women. The organizations that serve, you know, some of it is institution, but some of it is about in the spaces.
The pulpit, Jew synagogue life, and what percentage, what are the other primary choices? My question. And the second,
file in to do these statistics. And there's, and especially, I mentioned this earlier, so you look at the chaplaincy. All of the, and this is why I'm looking, you are. We have, Elliot, 30% in education and congregations to 40% in the congregational setting, 9% of whom in, you know, synagogue schools, educators in congregations in charge of all of a variety of educational roles. So it's
or not. If you added schools, yes. Yes.
what is the other 60%?
Group is in Jewish, and not, we have specific, I can give you the specific percentages, I just don't have them in my head. 20%, then chaplaincy positions. But what was significant to us is that by far, women, the synagogue environment, which doesn't appear, but the press says it's really significantly, significant 9 or 10, and it's blogging, living, contributing to Haaretz and other things. And then another, they would teach at one synagogue school, teach at another, and do bar mitzvah tutoring. There's
Shalom in Berkeley. To point out that the tone that when this began was one that I imagine wasn't going to be when the first decision came down, and to celebrate the ordination of women as rabbis, as opposed to, and so I imagine that, and it was delivered in an acerbic way, but when Danny Gordis wrote his article, Judaism Exhausted, in Conservative Judaism, the Journal, where he wondered if that has become a new assumption within the conservative movement, to be proud of the ethical advances within halakha, that we ask questions. When it comes to questions that might come up later, if we celebrate that we make, I imagine that challenges older assumptions about pluralism and where a halakha in the position where it was before stands today. So I'm wondering if we could think about that out loud.
I want to say one thing we're saying, you know, women aren't in congregations. But the chaplaincy has grown and become such an important thing because of women that I don't think we've mentioned that really, the importance of the chaplaincy, which was like nothing years ago. I mean, no, but there were no Jewish chaplains, there were Christian chaplains. And I know Sam Klagsbrun, my husband, was very involved in starting many of these chaplaincy programs. If we're celebrating, I think we should. That's one more thing to celebrate.
My brief response is it's generational. Generational. And that I would anecdotally say that the young one does celebrate, for granted, and celebrates it. And there are a lot of conservative rabbis who are unfortunately still looking over the orthodoxy and saying, can we really, are we less legitimate because we're doing this? Like, do we really have
Back on Menachem's question, actually, and I'm hoping that our Chancellor Eisen, as moderator, you as well, will answer this. If this is what conservative Judaism stands for and celebrates, it's understanding and appreciating pluralism, a diversity, that is problematic 30 years later, that in this institution where we celebrate this, we still aspects and facets of that as we continue to celebrate.
I agree, absolutely.
Hi, I'm J.B. Sachs from De Toledo High School in West Hills, California, and Congregation Am Hayam in California. I don't have as much. It presented opportunities for some cooperation and dialogue. That there were discussions between women and men and women about and then just about how we process and think, and I think there's a lot more positivity about religion's work and how cooperatively still built and on those early discussions. It's for me as a male, it's not only the practice and their capacity to have myself, my brain, and my soul nurtured out the of my colleagues and above that, I think the whole process of debate around the inclusion was also about what is the measure of human dignity within, and might care women gave a lot of us hope that we might be respected and cared for as well, and that and contribute would be eventually welcomed and a place opened up where we could larger world where we as Jews work to make tikkun olam. I think that really hasn't been enough as well. Thank you.
I have to warn you all that we have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, unfortunately. This is great, but 5.
Rachel Ain, the rabbi at Sutton Place Synagogue. Just a few comments and a question to Francine, that there were no women applicants and that women should sort of step forward and put themselves out there, and you didn't say deal with whatever comes. I think that a lot of us have done that. The question of how many women are currently is not necessarily a fair jobs. It's just how many women, especially in senior positions it doesn't matter the size, but of senior positions. I think we need to remember, I can tell you that in the job searches that I've gone through, unfortunately I've been blessed to be at Sutton Place Synagogue, I have consistently been asked, what am I going to do when my kids get sick? How am I going to be on the bima with men? What am I going to do if a man or a woman doesn't want to come to me? I know that my male colleagues, at least the older ones, did not get those questions. And so standard conservative movement, which makes me look at the article in the Washington Post several weeks ago, which celebrated so many of our colleagues, our female colleagues, who went out and developed incredible new initiatives. And I wonder, I haven't asked them, did they do it as a result of or regardless of they felt the synagogues might have been a part? When we were talking about numbers before,
Round of comments by panelists. Blu, would you like to begin?
So in this moment of Jewish history, an impact the conservative movement has had on all of this. And as I reflected on the timeline. That's how it happened. It happened with a step forward, a step backward, back, 2 steps forward. That was the timeline in the this is one of those pushbacks that's going to, you know, forward rapidly. I also think that the ordination of women was just a major increment of social and the dignity element is a very powerful part of that. So, but I'm concerned about this reports here, there, and everywhere about the of identity, and I'm wondering coexist right now and with synagogue life are very important, and women are bringing their creative energies to a lot of those new initiatives, and I about this it reflects on life too. New initiatives making more that signal that maybe our synagogue is more than less demanding, more intensive rather than less.
About celebration, I think this gathering of celebration is very important, and we have to remember what has been achieved. As Rachel said, there really is tremendous. I think we have to do a better job of trying to train people. But I actually think that the experimentation is the experiment can be brought to bear. What we outside by experiment can't stay the same. I think we're getting too many messages that what we're doing is not working, and I don't want to give. But I think experimentation is definitely and more sharing of what learnings are from experimentation.
I'm just going to speak very personally. It was one of the great of my life, instrumental in helping women to become rabbis. They're moving 30 years ago. Who could have imagined where we were? Who could imagine this? Who could imagine rabbis being women? Who can imagine women not but leading services and doing so I'm not pessimistic. I think we're in now we will change, we will develop, there will be of synagogues as are developed, but I think the core will be, I will say this again, I think the core of conservative Judaism tremendously authentic, the job of this group and
let's thank all the members of our panel one last time.